So what I want to talk about today is I want to start to have a conversation and really open up a conversation for you to have with yourselves and with each other here about hope. And let me be really clear on what I mean by hope, because I'm not talking about sort of unbridled optimism or unfounded dreams. There's a psychologist over at Harvard named George Vaillant, and the way he defines hope is a realistic, positive vision for the future. And so that's what I want to talk about this morning, is how you can start to find your realistic, positive vision for the future. So the title of the slide is Achieving Post-Traumatic Growth, and John talked about hunkering down and surviving, and that's necessary in order to get to the point of post-traumatic growth. But trauma is an interesting thing. What we're most familiar with post-trauma is post-traumatic stress disorder, right? Most typically in the military, you see horrible things at war, and you come back shell-shocked, traumatized. And it's true that for a minority of people, that is what happens. But the research now shows that for the vast majority of people, post-trauma, they experience growth. So let's take a look at what that might look like. Most of you are probably familiar with Lance Armstrong. Whether you like him or don't like him, think he took performance-enhancing drugs or not, this is a man who fought cancer and came back to win 7 Tour de France's, or Tours de France. I don't know how it goes, but anyway. But I would suggest that it wasn't winning the Tour de France that really is what made him feel like he achieved post-traumatic growth, because what he said, cancer's the best thing that ever happened to me. That's a pretty bold claim. And it may be just that it's winning these bike races, but I would suggest that it's more likely about the Lance Armstrong Foundation and Live Strong, and that having cancer connected him to a deeper purpose in life, helping millions around the world who are also fighting cancer. But admittedly, post-traumatic growth does not usually look like this is the best thing that ever happened to me. Post-traumatic growth usually looks more like this. Has anyone read this book, When Bad Things Happen to Good People? Yeah, a number of you. Yeah. Harold Kushner is a rabbi, actually out in Massachusetts, and he wrote this book when his young son passed away. And he said that losing his son has made him a better rabbi, better at listening, more compassionate, more empathetic. And this is really important. He also said he would give all of those skills back to have his son back. And so post-traumatic growth is not necessarily Lance Armstrong, cancer is the best thing that ever happened. So if you're experiencing a lot of anguish and frustration right now, it doesn't mean that goes away for the growth. It means the growth comes in spite of that. So let's take a look at what people experience as post-traumatic growth. It lumps into 5 categories. There's 2 researchers, Tedeschi and Calhoun, who study post-traumatic growth. And basically it falls into these 5 categories. 1, personal growth. And so this is like, whatever doesn't kill me only makes me stronger. You know, that you went through it, you can go through anything. The next is an appreciation of life, a focus on your priorities. And so you may sort of have always been thinking to yourself, I'd really like to spend more time on the water boating, or I'd like to spend more time with my children. In the wake of trauma, that's when people really change their habits. So this is something that comes out of post-traumatic growth. New paths or options. This is what I think happened to Lance Armstrong, that it never occurred to him that he could help thousands, millions of people with cancer. But by having cancer himself, he realized this new path, this new option in life. Stronger, closer, better, warmer relationships often comes out of trauma. And last, a higher spirituality. So if you have religion, if you believe in God, people are often closer to their God, to religion, as a result of trauma. Otherwise, though, spirituality can mean anything that you hold sacred, anything that's meaningful to you. That could be family. That could be educating the next generation. Whatever it is that you hold sacred. So in thinking about what trauma is and whether you might be going through some form of it right now, one of the ways I like to think about trauma is as sort of like an earthquake, right? The ground underneath you is shifting, is quaking. You don't know where you can find your footing. You don't know where you can stand firmly. You don't know when it's going to end. You don't know if you'll be all right coming out of it. And there are all of a sudden new roadblocks in your way. Things that you didn't anticipate, that you didn't want there, and now that you're having to find a way around. Or worse yet, it might not be something that you can actually get around. It might be that the road that you had been traveling on is no option for you. And so if you have clients that are a couple years away from retirement, and now they're finding that they can't retire, they had a destination at the end of this road, and all of a sudden the circumstances have changed. And so it may be that they just have to take a detour, right, a longer way to the place that they were going. Or, as Lance Armstrong discovered, it may be that in having to change the path that you're traveling down, you realize that some other destination is more meaningful to you. And so I think this is a powerful metaphor for how post-traumatic growth happens. But if we look at San Francisco, the earthquake of 1906, right, some of the houses were toppled over, some buildings fell over completely. But what San Francisco did, what the people of San Francisco did, is they sort of thought to themselves, what do we want this to be like? What do we want our city to look like? And they rebuilt. And so we have a whole new San Francisco because of the earthquake. It doesn't mean that there wasn't pain involved in the earthquake, because there was. And having a new San Francisco doesn't wash away that pain, but we have a new San Francisco. So let's personalize it. Rather than talking about San Francisco, let's talk about what you might be feeling like day to day in the office, right? And if we sort of take it down a notch, does this connect with people? If we take it down a notch from trauma and just bring it to the talk about stress, right? That we know the effect of stress, that it makes us fatigued, we lose sleep at night, our muscles are more sore, sometimes we can't eat, sometimes we can't stop eating, right? That's what I do when I'm stressed, actually, believe it or not. But the reality is that stress has a job. Stress isn't there just to do those bad things to us. Stress is actually there to sort of whisper in our ear, something's not working. And sometimes it doesn't just whisper in our ear. Sometimes it's much more vocal than that. But that's what stress's job is, to let us know that something in life isn't working. It's there to help us question our fundamental assumptions. Right? And so we've got these fundamental assumptions about how the world works, assumptions about what our role is in the world, what we're here to do, and assumptions about how we can successfully navigate that world. And when we're feeling stressed, it's an alert that one of those assumptions might just be faulty. That we've had this assumption about how we can be successful, how we can be effective, and we're running into roadblocks. Right? And the people that achieve post-traumatic growth achieve it by answering two questions, by doing two things. One, they prioritize what's important. And so all of those questions about, how do I navigate the world? What does the world look like? What's it going to look like coming out of this? They answer those questions by looking at what's the most important thing to me. And then they also achieve post-traumatic growth by letting go of the stuff that they can't control. And that's really the hardest one, at least for me. So let's do it right now. Let's take a little case study and look at that first one. What's the most important? I'd like you to take a few seconds and think about the three most important things in your life. And now, as you're thinking about those, also think about if a client was to write you a deep thank you note for something that you had helped them with, what would they be writing you that note about? Maybe they already have. Maybe you've gotten notes like that were really touching. What were those notes about? What were they thanking you for? That's a clue into what's important to them. Right? So if you think about it, right, what is that note about? Is it about something that was important to them? Was that note about something that was somewhat within your control? And as I started thinking about these two ways to achieve post-traumatic growth, I realized that in the investment world, we already have a nice schematic for these 2 points. Everyone recognize the efficient frontier? Now, normally, you may think like I chose the wrong schematic for this, but no, this is what I meant to. The efficient frontier, right, looks at investment return and investment risk. But if we broaden that out and don't just talk about investments, but talk about the way in which you spend your time, you dedicate your energy, the tasks that you do with clients, the way that your clients spend their time, right? We look at that the efficient frontier is really talking about maximizing return while minimizing risk. It's talking about prioritizing what's important, right, and yielding what's out of your control, minimizing the risk. And so I'd like to sort of start this off as a discussion about true hope. Remember, realistic, positive vision for the future. That the top left quadrant is where you'll find hope. It's where the stuff is most important to you and to your clients, and it's where it's most within our control. And so with that in mind, I'd like to pose a thought question that we also sent out to the forum, the Advanced Marketing Forum a couple of weeks ago, and that is, what is your role? How much of your job is predicting the future? How much of your job is planning for the future? And how much of your job is guiding clients into the future, walking with them through the scary times? And from the conversations that I've had with many of you lately, most of your job right now is guiding the clients into the future. But with that in mind, I'd like to pose an additional question on these topics, and that is, how do you spend your time learning to get better? Right? As you're reading articles about your business, as you're coming to conferences like this, how many of the sessions that you're going to, how many of the articles that you're reading are about predicting the future? How many are about planning for the future? And how many are about guiding clients into the future? And so as a consumer of these resources, the articles and the sessions, I would urge you that if there's an imbalance from where it is and where you'd like it, to let us know. This is a guy named Dr. Chris Feutner. And when I was first thinking about giving this presentation, I was going to just give the sort of, maximizing what's important, minimizing the risk, and not, letting you figure out in your own lives what is important, how to do this stuff. But this guy changed my mind on whether or not to sort of plant a seed during this 15 minutes. Dr. Chris Feutner is a pediatric palliative care physician. And so he works with families with young children who have a very low probability of survival. He works with clients who have very little hope. And he sees it as his main job in life to help those clients find their hope, find their realistic, positive vision for the future. And he came in and spoke down at the University of Pennsylvania, down at our class, and he told us, among other stories, a story of a little girl named April. And, sorry, this is a tough story. While April was in the hospital, April's family came into Chris's office for a consultation, and they sort of, like many of your clients maybe, they were hunched, right? They were stressed. They weren't able to support each other. They weren't even looking at each other. And it's very understandable. They were going through a terrible time. And once everyone sat down, Chris, he asked them, "What do you hope for?" And after a very uncomfortable moment, the mom spoke up, April's mom spoke up and said, "Most days I hope that this is all just a bad dream." And Chris nodded and said, "What else do you hope for?" And April's mom said, "I hope that we can stop torturing her with these tests. I feel terrible about these tests." And Chris nodded. "What else do you guys hope for?" And for the first time, April's dad spoke up and said, "I hope we can get the hell out of this hospital. I want to get April home to visit her brothers and sisters and to get baptized and I just hope that April can live as long as possible." And after listening to all of their hopes, Chris said what he often says, which is, I really wish things were different. I wish we could do all of these things. And I think we can get started on some of them. And when he said that, I think we can get started on some of them, the mood in the room changed. I mean, it wasn't jubilant by any stretch, but it was hopeful, right? Because there was some realistic possibility for something to be better than it was right then. And so what Chris did and what he does in his professional life is he listens to what's important. He just literally asks his clients, what do you hope for? And he listens, and he keeps asking, what do you hope for? What else do you hope for? And once he hears everything that's important to them, then he uses his professional lens as a doctor to know what is outside of our control and what's within our control. And so without really knowing about the efficient frontier, Chris uses this framework. And so I'd like to open up a conversation starting at this conference and continuing on as you travel back to all of your practices about what's important in your life and in your clients' lives and about what's within our control. Because that's where we can find true hope. That's where we can have a conversation on a realistic, positive vision for the future. Thanks.